Hey, what's up, guys? Eric Temple here, and what I'm going to discuss today is something kind of off topic in relation to training. So, I'm not going to really talk about sets and reps today, or the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what happens psychologically when we don't see the results that we want in either training or maybe even your sporting event that you participate in. So, it could be basketball, baseball, different things like that. And it happens a lot to people that are in bodybuilding and powerlifting. So if you're someone that squats, bench, and deadlifts a lot, and you don't see the results that you want to during the training process, different things happen. So emotional responses to the training that you're having. If you're going through a roller coaster where you're going through a bunch of ups and downs, peaks and valleys, some people have breakdowns because they don't understand what's going on. So sometimes you have to take a step back and reflect on what's going on around you. So I'm going to take different concepts and ideas of life and try to relate that to the training process. So in my mind, there's three things that are really important to development. It can be athletic development, it can be developing strength, and that's work or effort, same thing in my mind. And then you have patience and time. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about that might relate to the training process is building a family. Okay, so if you're a husband and wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, and say you want to have a family eventually, you have a kid, you have to understand that there's going to be times when you have to deal with one another, and it might not be as great as you want it to be, or you might have to deal with some things that happen with your child and you just don't have the patience for it at that time. At that point, you have to take a step back from yourself. So I'm not saying that I'm a father, but eventually when that time comes, I have to realize that there's times during my relationship with my spouse or my significant other that things might not be as great as they should. And that's completely fine. That happens in relationships. And when you have a family, you just have to take a step back from yourself and realize that everything that you do throughout this process of raising a child and being a good husband, you have to understand that there's work involved in it. There's a lot of patience involved with building a family, and it's a lot of time. It's from the time you get married, from the time you have a kid, it lasts forever until you die. You have to take care of your kid, your family, if that's what you want to do in life. You can also relate this to any athletic any athletics. So if you're someone in basketball, say LeBron James, for instance, he is an unbelievable basketball player, probably one of the best ever. He probably started at a very young age, at say 3. He played basketball growing up, played in high school, went right to the pros. He didn't even have to go to college because he was that good. But say you have a baseball player, for instance, who starts at 5 years old. They play Little League, they play high school ball, they play college ball if they're good enough, and if they're good enough to go on from there, they can play minor league ball. There's different levels of minor league ball, and if they're then good enough, they can make it to the majors. And there's times when you make it to the majors and you might never play. And when you think about the amount of work and effort that go into that process, it's a lot. There's a lot of patience that you might have to deal with coaches, other players that you might not really like too much. And it's a big chunk of time. So say you're 5 years old when you start T-ball, 25 by the time you make it to the majors, or even 30. That's 20 to 25 years of time that you've taken out of your life and tried to make yourself the strongest version of you in that sporting event. And that's absolutely unbelievable when you look at that. So if you can relate that to training, people think they want to get strong right away. I'm sorry, it's not that way. People want a shortcut all the time. You have to put your work in. You have to be patient through times when you think your training's shitty. And that's going to happen, especially if you're training for strength. Your deadlift's always not going to be where you want it to be. Your squat isn't, your bench press isn't. But you have to realize that it's work, effort. You have to be patient through those emotional times when you're like, oh, what am I doing wrong? That's when you take a step back and you reflect on what you might need to change in your training, what variables you might need to mess around with. Another example, and this is one that's really close to me, is my father was just diagnosed with lymphoma in May, right before they went to Maui. And they weren't able to go because of the issue that happened. And It's something that devastated him. He was mad for a long time about it, and he's probably one of the most physical men I've ever met in my life. He's 6'4", around 245. He's done manual labor his whole life, doesn't drink much, he's never smoked a cigarette in his life. And when he found out that he had to deal with this issue, it like buried him. So it was something that, in a way, it was a valley. It was a hard time that for him, for the family, and something that he had to deal with. And he is now cured. He went through 6 months of chemo, and now he is cured. It took a lot of work and effort, a lot of patience on his part, and it took time. Even though it was only 6 months out of his life, it probably seemed longer than it was because of some of the things that he had to deal with. So if you can take some of those areas and concepts and ideas of building a family and developing yourself from a young athlete all the way up to the professional levels, or dealing with something like cancer, training doesn't seem so important. So if you can realize when you have those struggles, those emotional responses to things like not having a good training day or training week or training cycle, that's only like a few weeks, a few months out of your life during the training process, which should be years and years and years and years of constant training to become the strongest version of yourself. There's no shortcuts when it comes to getting yourself strong. Don't think there is. There's going to be times when things are better and worse. And once you realize that, things will fall into place. So if you can keep all of those concepts and ideas in mind, guys, it should help out a bunch. So thanks for listening.